The next subject that we're going to talk about is JK Armament's CCK can. And that's what it looks like right there. And we're going to break this little guy down. So most of us that have shot and or own 9mm cans own something like this. And typically, for most of us as men, bigger is always better, right? If you can barely get your hand around it, then that's impressive. However, there are some pros to this can, and then there's also some cons to this can. So we're going to talk about one of them right off the bat. Generally, cans like this require a booster, so it's going to add length to the can. Now, normally, like I said, that's a good thing, but in this particular case, sometimes smaller is better. The other thing is when you're looking at how wide the can is, a lot of times if you're running stock sights, you can't shoot as effectively if you run stock sights through the can. You can't generally be as accurate as you can if you were to run suppressor height sights and or a red dot. So a little bit of trade-off there. Doesn't mean you can't do it, but we generally know that we're much more accurate if we can get a good sight picture on target and we don't have to shoot it through the can. Enter in JK Armament CCK can, and when we start to look at this, it's a noticeable difference right here. So we're talking this small of a can on your gun, and that's what we're going to start to break down. The pros and cons to running something like this. The first thing that I like to do is just show you in comparison. So a Bic lighter, and what you're looking at is a 5 baffle system here. So pretty small when you compare it to that. It's extremely lightweight. It's kind of ridiculous. And at a certain point when they first showed me this and we went out to shoot it, I kind of thought it was a joke. Anybody would. Let's get real. This is a 9mm can. Let's break down a couple things. So at the ear, typically is what we're looking at as far as what is considered ear safe. And generally it's about 140 decibels that's considered ear safe. Now, when we break down this particular can running subsonic ammunition, dry, meaning we haven't put any water or we haven't Vaseline the can at all, the number basically reads 142.6. That's at the ear. Now, if we run this wet, then generally, again, running subsonics, we're at 136.4 at the ear. And that's really not too shabby considering what this is. A couple other things. When you look at this can, one of the things that allows it to stay so small is that we don't need a booster now. The other thing is you can run factory sights. Now, don't get me wrong. I run night fission sights. And I've got a nice sight picture over the suppressor. You don't even realize it's there. Of course, most of us now run dots. So if you run a dot, you're in even better shape. Whether you run this or whether you run a bigger can or not, the difference with this is how small, how lightweight. And if you had to utilize this quick and hasty, this isn't really a bad option in an effort to try to maintain some form of ear safe. As far as stealth, I'm not sure how much you're going to squeeze out of that, but we also know that you're going to be much quieter than if you were to go completely loud. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to talk about kind of that wet and dry aspect. So as I was mentioning before, you can run this wet or you can run it dry. Usually what I do is I'll break the can apart. This one happens to have, if you put it together like this complete, it's going to have 5 baffles. And all you're going to do is run some Vaseline. Some of you guys will know what that is. Or Vagisil warming lotion, something of that, if you want to be just a little bit more intimate. But you would go to each one of these baffles and you would leave it with Vaseline on it. Now, generally, if you ever run a can like that with Vaseline and or water, usually what will happen is by the time you're done shooting that mag, usually it's starting to get louder because you've kind of cooked everything off. One of the things that you can also do with this can is shorten it up. So if you don't like this particular 5 baffle length, understanding that you're going to go up in noise, you could just put the end cap on here. Now, in an effort to make this even quieter, if you were to run a wipe, so a lot of you guys are familiar with running cans on your 9mm handguns, and a lot of times they're capable of putting a wipe at the end of it. That wipe does really make a big difference and keeping it quieter. But what I've noticed is generally my accuracy degrades. Weird to say, but if you were to do something more Clandestine, I guess, and you were to decide to use a wipe, you're probably at that point going to need to be doing very close shots, almost contact shots on people in order to try to remain as quote unquote stealthy as possible. But this combination, the way I've shot it before with wipes on it, it does make a big difference. It's just, I don't want to lose the accuracy out of it. So when we look at this from a perspective of how the end user wants to set it up, we can make it smaller. It's just going to get a little bit louder. So the next thing we're going to talk about is kind of a size comparison. Unfortunately, I didn't have a smaller gun to put this can on. What you'll find is where it really seems to excel are guns like a 365, a Glock 43 or a 43X, a Shield with a threaded barrel, obviously, guns that are a little bit smaller. This just happens to be a Glock 19 chopped to a 26, just because I like the sight radius, and I've kind of condensed the can down to a 2-baffle system. Now, when you compare that, remember it's a 19 to a Glock 34, that's what you're gaining. So if you were to put this on a 26, you would be damn close to the size of a 34. Now, why is that important? Well, dependent upon the kind of holsters that you run and dependent upon, what you do, whether it's just for fun and shooting at the gun range or whether your work is a little more serious, this is a Tier 1 concealed appendix carry holster. And what's nice about this is because of the diameter of the can, most holsters that you guys have that have an opening at the bottom, this will blow right through. Whereas normally, in the past, you would have to get a special holster specifically, made, and generally they don't conceal too well. They're usually some form of outside the waistband holster. Now, this is another holster from Tier 1 Concealed, and to give you a perspective, this is a G17 holster. And that's what it looks like. So you would, dependent upon, again, what you're doing, wear this on your side and still be able to get a good draw out of this and at least be as quiet as possible. Now, we do know that there are some law enforcement agencies that serve warrants specifically related to meth. And it's very important that both their primary and their secondary is suppressed. In the event that they got to fire that gun off, you're trying to contain as much flame and blast as possible due to the type of environments that they're in. I think for military doing certain styles of operations, to be able to have the gun on their side and very quickly put it together and stay and remain as low profile as possible, I think is a huge deal. The ability to get it right back into either an appendix carry holster, which of course, if that barrel's sticking out and you get on the gun, it's going to get a little hot. But if you were wearing an outside the waistband, it really wouldn't be an issue because it would be coming in contact with your clothing. For civilians, one of the things that I always like to do with a new shooter is just give them a 22 suppressed. 1, so they don't have to wear ears. 2, so they can enjoy shooting and get comfortable with just shooting. And I can have a conversation with them because we don't need to worry about loud gun noises. And I find that for a lot of new shooters, it's the loud noise that bothers people along with recoil, but it seems to be the explosion that really kind of jostles them right initially. So to be able to then later step up to a 9mm can on a gun like this, just for that transition, I think is a cool attribute. And regardless of that, if nothing else, just for you to own one to have fun with it. So some other aspects to kind of think about in regards to JK Armament's CCK can.